In a small apartment room lived a man named Yohei with his girlfriend Reina. By now they had been living together for 2 years, but in truth, that day marked Reina's last day there. It was the day they officially broke up and were no longer a couple. The reason for the breakup was Reina's growing frustration with Yohei's insensitivity. He never seemed to understand her feelings, and even at the end, there was no trace of regret on his face when they parted. That night, while spending time alone in his room, Yohei began hearing strange noises. Suddenly, the lights went out, and the TV turned on by itself. Objects in the room started moving mysteriously, making Yohei panic. He suspected a supernatural presence was disturbing his quiet life. Sure enough, a ghostly figure appeared right in front of him, a woman dressed all in white, venting her anger at Yohei's cold and indifferent attitude toward his girlfriend's feelings. When the lights flickered back on, Yohei could finally see the ghost's face clearly. She wasn't as terrifying as he'd imagined. In fact, she wasn't wearing a bra, which made her recoil in embarrassment as Yohei stared. Understandably, this was Yohei's first time seeing and directly communicating with a spirit, but that wasn't what mattered. The ghost wanted to talk about Yohei's behavior, how he always tried to act kind, but never truly considered his partner's emotions. It turned out that the ghost had been watching him ever since he moved into the apartment. According to her, Yohei never learned from his mistakes, nor did he make any effort to improve, which made it no surprise that Reina eventually walked out. Since Yohei's arrival, the ghost had actually tried to reveal herself, but she was blocked by the strong spiritual presence Reina carried with her. Only after Reina left was the ghost finally able to appear. Yohei asked why, if she hated him, the ghost didn't just leave the room. But the ghost explained she had been unable to leave no matter how hard she tried, even after all these years. She didn't know why she was stuck there. The only explanation she could think of was that she had become an earthbound spirit with no memory of her past, just the realization that one day she suddenly existed as a ghost. When Yohei's gaze drifted toward her body again, the ghost slapped him with her hand, knocking him unconscious. The next morning, Yohei woke up and found that his cheek was bruised. At work, his colleague Kenan became curious about the injury and quickly took a photo of it. Yohei then asked if Kenan had ever seen a ghost. Kenan replied that she didn't have any spiritual sight, so she couldn't see ghosts or anything like that. However, when Kenan looked at the photo she had just taken, she was suddenly shocked. She showed Yohei that a black aura was surrounding his face in the picture. After work, Yohei stopped by the convenience store. Knowing that there was a ghost in his room now, he decided to buy some incense. Carefully, he entered his apartment and immediately lit the incense he had just purchased. The scent of the incense made the ghost girl reappear. It actually seemed to heal her. She felt soothed by the aroma. Yohei assumed that the ghost was gone, but the girl told him that she had been living in the room long before he moved in. The next day, Yohei went to a real estate agency to ask about the history of his apartment unit. He wondered if there had ever been an incident, like a murder, in the room, especially since he had started experiencing supernatural events. But the agent seemed to hide something, insisting that nothing unusual had ever happened there. With no clear answers, Yohei returned home. When he opened the door, the apartment was filled with smoke from incense the ghost had burned herself. She loved the scent so much that she had used all the incense Yohei had bought. However, Yohei worried that things would get dangerous if she kept doing whatever she wanted. The ghost girl often appeared suddenly, startling Yohei to death, especially when he woke up and saw her near him. Yohei's harsh words made the girl sad. She didn't understand why he was so angry when she wasn't in the room by choice. If she could leave, she would have done so long ago. Feeling guilty, Yohei apologized for hurting her feelings. He realized the girl could step out onto the balcony, which was still technically part of the room. She loved spending time there because it was the only place that gave her access to the outside world. Yohei asked if she had any memories from her life. She said her memory wasn't completely gone. She remembered some fragments, like that she wasn't a student and had already been working, though she couldn't remember where. As for her name, she remembered that it had the letters A and I in it. Based on that, Yohei decided to call her Aisuke. Although it sounded like a pet name, the girl liked it. Aisuke tried leaving through the door, but no matter where she exited, she always reappeared back in the room, usually from the balcony. She constantly wondered and tried to remember what had caused her death. From the way she always seemed cheerful and full of energy, she doubted that she would have taken her own life. Not wanting Aisuke to dwell on dark thoughts, Yohei changed the subject in hopes of making her smile again. The next morning, Aisuke felt a strong desire to touch a man's body. She focused her gaze on Yohei and reached out to him. Surprisingly, her touch no longer passed through him. It seemed that Aisuke had developed a special interest in Yohei, possibly because she died before ever experiencing what it felt like to love someone. Yohei understood the loneliness Aisuke must have felt, trapped in that room for so long with no one to accept her. He was genuinely grateful for her presence, someone who reminded him to go to work, someone who paid attention to him. Likewise, Aisuke no longer felt empty because she now had someone who saw her and talked to her. At a farewell party for a colleague, Kanan, who knew Yohei had recently broken up with his girlfriend, began trying to get closer to him. Kanan mentioned that she had also just ended a relationship, and her ex looked a lot like Yohei. But, as usual, Yohei's lack of sensitivity made him dismiss her words without much thought. On their way home, Kanan insisted on dropping by Yohei's apartment. She was pushy, and Yohei didn't really have a reason to refuse. Once inside, Kanan commented that the room smelled like her grandmother's house, which made sense as Aisuke's ghostly presence filled the air, though Kanan couldn't see or sense her. Feeling uneasy, Yohei subtly suggested that Kanan should leave once she finished her drink. But she refused, wanting to spend more time alone with him. Aisuke could only watch in silence as the two got closer. Just as Kanan began flirting more aggressively with Yohei, the lights suddenly went out. Aisuke's form appeared, terrifying Kanan into hiding. The ghostly manifestation wasn't something Aisuke intended. She wasn't trying to scare anyone. In her panic, she tried to disappear, but her presence caused a sharp ringing in Kanan's ears. Even so, Kanan didn't blame Yohei for the strange event and left in a hurry. Aisuke couldn't help but feel jealous seeing Yohei bring another woman home, especially so soon after his breakup. She had even witnessed Kanan kissing him. But Yohei assured Aisuke that he had no romantic feelings for Kanan, and their relationship was strictly that of co-workers. Aisuke always thought Yohei was a caring person, someone who valued emotional connection, despite his lack of sensitivity at times. From her words, Yohei could sense that Aisuke longed for a relationship with someone like him. After some reflection, Aisuke realized she was simply curious, wondering what it would have been like to date someone like Yohei. Ever since becoming a wandering spirit, she had promised herself to be honest about her feelings. Gently, she moved closer to Yohei and leaned in for a kiss. But Yohei, surprised, instinctively pushed her away. Oddly enough, he had physically touched Aisuke. A ghost. For the first time, a human could actually touch her. This made Aisuke feel incredibly nervous. The next day, Kanan came to see Yohei again. She wanted to talk about what had happened the night before, about the dangerous ghost that was living in his apartment. Kanan insisted they perform an exorcism and offered to introduce Yohei to her aunt, a paranormal expert. Since then, Yohei began reflecting on what life would be like if Aisuke were truly gone. Being able to touch Aisuke made it feel no different than touching a living human. Aisuke felt the same. For her, being able to physically connect with a human like this was the happiest feeling she'd ever known. Yohei started to grow more curious about the beautiful girl's past and what could have led to her death. The next evening, instead of heading home, Yohei accompanied Kanan to a bar to meet her aunt, a female spiritualist named Misaki. Misaki explained that the spirit in Yohei's room was an earthbound spirit, a soul that clings to a specific place and often manifests repeatedly in the same location. She warned Yohei not to get too close to the ghost, especially not to physically interact with it, as that could endanger his life. But Yohei clarified that he had no intention of banishing the spirit. He only wanted to understand her background and learn about who she was before she died. Even so, Kanan kept pressing Misaki to perform the exorcism. Back in the apartment, Aisuke assumed that Yohei had returned, but instead it was Misaki who entered. Though she couldn't see the ghost directly, Misaki could sense the presence of a spirit woman bound to that room and unable to rest in peace. Misaki tried to communicate with Aisuke, explaining that she didn't come to harm her, but to help her resolve her regrets in the living world. Misaki understood that Aisuke wasn't a malevolent spirit, but that the living and the dead belonged to different worlds. If Aisuke stayed close to Yohei, the worst-case scenario was that Yohei might die. Misaki then revealed the location of a spiritual doorway Aisuke could use to leave the room. It was in the direction of the window leading to the balcony. Meanwhile, Yohei and Kanan waited outside. Yohei looked nervous and anxious about what would happen to Aisuke. Before long, Misaki came out and told them that everything had been taken care of, dragging her niece away with her. Yohei rushed back to the open window. At the edge of the balcony, he found Aisuke still there, staring off in silence. He was relieved that Misaki hadn't done anything harmful to her. Aisuke's voice was weaker than usual. She admitted she felt guilty if her presence had been disturbing Yohei's personal life. But Yohei assured her that he hadn't been bothered in the slightest. He only asked the paranormal for help to learn more about her past, so he could better understand her. Still, Aisuke's expression remained sad. She asked Yohei if she could make a request, something that might seem selfish. Her wish, she wanted to be his girlfriend. Now that she knew how to leave the room, she explained, they could go out together, enjoy life, and spend time outside the apartment. At first, Yohei was unsure whether he was the right man for Aisuke. After all, he used to be emotionally clueless and often disappointed his ex-girlfriend. But Aisuke disagreed. She told Yohei he wasn't like that at all. After getting to know him better, she understood that he simply didn't know how to express his feelings properly. His words might sound indifferent, but his actions were always filled with care. Of all the people who had ever stayed in that apartment, the only man Aisuke ever admired was Yohei. As long as she was with him, she was willing to go anywhere. To fulfill Aisuke's wish, Yohei even took time off work. On his way home, he initially planned to buy incense, but his attention was drawn to a pair of shoes on sale at a nearby shop. The next day, he gifted the shoes to Aisuke. He thought it wasn't right for his girlfriend to go outside barefoot like that. The gift made Aisuke incredibly happy. Not only were the shoes cute, but they also fit her perfectly. It may have seemed like a simple gesture, but it was exactly this kind of thoughtful care that Aisuke admired most about Yohei. To leave the room, Aisuke had to jump from the balcony. Even though she was a ghost, she still felt scared about jumping. So Yohei promised he'd be waiting below to catch her. And just as the paranormal woman had said, Aisuke was finally able to step outside the room and wander around the city with Yohei. Somehow, the shoes he had given her allowed Aisuke to appear like a normal human to everyone who saw her. Aisuke wanted to visit the places Yohei often went to, starting with a small diner. The shop owner, who could see Aisuke, immediately brought them 2 glasses of water without being asked. While waiting for their food, Yohei couldn't take his eyes off Aisuke. Today, she looked more radiant than ever. Their next stop was the movie theater. Unfortunately, when they arrived, it was closed for the day. It was the only place Aisuke still remembered from her time as a living person. She used to go there a lot, as she loved watching films. But she had always dreamed of how wonderful it would be to watch a movie with someone she loved. Seeing the disappointment on her face, Yohei reassured her that they could still visit the theater another day. The two of them made a promise to come back again. The last place Aisuke wanted to go was the ocean. There, she called out to Yohei to thank him for all the happiness he had given her. So many memories rushed through her mind, all of them deeply meaningful. She then asked Yohei for a hug, and in that warm embrace, they both poured their hearts out. But Yohei couldn't help but feel confused. Why did Aisuke's request seem so serious and urgent? When he invited her on another date for the future, Aisuke looked away, as if hiding the sadness in her expression. Could they really have another chance? Aisuke couldn't answer him. As the sun began to set, they quietly decided to return home. One thing was certain. Today was a truly joyful day for Aisuke, and it was a feeling she would never forget. Yet Yohei remained unaware of all the signs Aisuke had been showing him. While Yohei was fast asleep, there was something important Aisuke wanted to say. Just as the paranormal had warned, their closeness might actually endanger Yohei's life. And if anything bad happened to him, Aisuke knew she'd be filled with deep regret. Even so, she was grateful for all the happiness Yohei had given her, and now she could finally rest in peace. Because of the depth of her love, Aisuke couldn't bring herself to say goodbye to Yohei directly. It was such a simple phrase, but so difficult to say to someone you truly love. So for the first and last time, Aisuke gave Yohei a parting kiss, silently thanking him for all the joy he brought her, and hoping that maybe, someday, they'd meet again. Then she left, carrying her sorrow with her. When Yohei awoke, unaware of what had happened, he tried to find Aisuke, but no matter where he searched, she was nowhere to be found. In his confusion and desperation, he went to Misaki, the paranormal expert, to ask about Aisuke. Misaki told him that the spirit had likely passed on peacefully. Their growing closeness would only have endangered Yohei's life, so Aisuke made the right decision. Misaki hadn't done anything. Everything was Aisuke's own choice. But Yohei, still unable to accept it, went to the movie theater where he and Aisuke had promised to meet. He waited until it closed, but she never came. Feeling hopeless, Yohei turned to the real estate agent, his last hope, to ask about the girl who once lived in his apartment. Though the man initially resisted, since it was confidential information, he eventually gave in out of pity and revealed the girl's identity. The next day, Yohei visited Aisuke's grave. That's when he finally learned her real name, Arai Yeyuki. What he regretted most was how she had left without saying goodbye, vanishing as if their entire time together had just been a dream. Still, Yohei chose to believe that Aisuke was real. All the memories they shared, all the time they spent together, none of it was a dream. It would always remain in his heart. From that day on, Yohei went back to living a normal, quiet life. Kanon, who once tried to get close to him, now had a new boyfriend, but Yohei didn't care. To him, a woman like Kanon was more dangerous than any ghost. After many years in that apartment, the time finally came for Yohei to move out. The memories of the room might eventually fade, but not the memories they created inside it. Many years passed. Alone, Yohei would often visit the same movie theater that held so many memories. One day, a middle school girl called out to her friend who had just arrived, but oddly enough, the new girl couldn't take her eyes off Yohei, who was sitting not far from her. Without Yohei noticing, that short-haired girl had a face identical to Aisuke's. And that's it for the story series of this film. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to support this channel by subscribe, like and share. See you in the next video. Goodbye.